The snow fell gently outside the large windows of St. Margaret's Children's Hospital, the flakes illuminated by the soft glow of the holiday lights strung along the eaves. Inside, the atmosphere was bittersweet. Nurses bustled from room to room. Doctors carried charts with weary determination, and the halls echoed with both laughter and the occasional cry of pain. Amid the quiet chaos, Emily McCall, a nurse with a knack for connecting with patients, was making her rounds. Emily had always loved working with children, even though their resilience sometimes broke her heart. The stories of struggle and survival, of families waiting anxiously for news, reminded her why she had chosen this path. But this year, as Christmas approached, one case had drawn her attention more than others: 7-year-old Robbie Carter. Robbie had been in the hospital for 3 weeks following a surgery to remove a tumor. His recovery had been complicated, fraught with setbacks, and his parents, Olivia and Mark Carter, had rarely left his side. Yet with the holidays nearing, Robbie's condition had stabilized enough for the doctors to cautiously express optimism. It was on the morning of December 24th, as Emily checked Robbie's chart and adjusted the IV, that the little boy's raspy voice stopped her. "Miss Emily, do you think Santa will find me here?" Robbie asked. His wide eyes, a shade of pale green that seemed to reflect the hospital's fluorescent lights, were filled with uncertainty. Emily smiled, crouching to Robbie's level. "Santa always finds kids, Robbie, no matter where they are. He's got a GPS these days, you know." Robbie giggled weakly, but his smile faded quickly. "Mom and Dad said I might be here for Christmas. I don't know if they'll make it in time." The weight of that simple statement hit Emily hard. She squeezed Robbie's hand, then ruffled his hair. "Your parents love you more than anything. They'll be here as soon as they can, and so will Santa." Yet later that day, as Emily clocked out for a brief break, she couldn't shake Robbie's words. The Carters lived in a neighboring town, and with the unpredictable winter weather, there was always the chance something could delay them. Emily's heart ached at the thought of Robbie waking up alone on Christmas morning, wondering if he'd been forgotten. That evening, Emily found herself wandering the aisles of a small toy store near her apartment. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but when her eyes landed on a plush dragon with glittering wings, something clicked. It was cheerful, whimsical, and the kind of thing a 7-year-old boy might find exciting. She bought it without hesitation, along with a small card and wrapping paper covered in candy canes. Back at home, Emily wrapped the gift with care, handwriting a note. To Robbie: "Merry Christmas. Santa never forgets the brave ones." She smiled at her handiwork, imagining the boy's surprise. Emily didn't need thanks; knowing Robbie would wake up to a little joy was enough. The next day, Christmas Eve, the hospital was quieter than usual. Many patients who were stable had been discharged to spend the holidays at home. Robbie, however, was still under observation. His parents had stayed with him all day, reading stories and trying to keep his spirits up. Emily had been working a double shift. There was no one to cover for her, and the hospital was chronically understaffed. But even if she'd had the option to leave, she wasn't sure she would have. She felt responsible for the children under her care, especially Robbie. By the time evening rolled around, Olivia and Mark were visibly exhausted. Emily noticed Olivia nodding off in the corner chair, while Mark stretched his legs and glanced at the clock. "Why don't you two go home and rest?" Emily suggested gently as she entered the room to check Robbie's vitals. "I'll be here all night. Robbie's in good hands, I promise." Mark hesitated, but Olivia stirred and looked at Emily with grateful eyes. "Are you sure? It feels wrong leaving him, even for a little while." "He'll be fine," Emily reassured them. "You'll be back before he even notices you're gone." After some deliberation, they agreed, kissing Robbie goodnight and promising to return first thing in the morning. Robbie, half asleep, mumbled his goodbyes, clutching a blanket to his chest. Once they left, the hospital grew eerily quiet. Emily made her rounds, ensuring the patients in her care were comfortable. When the clock struck midnight, she slipped into Robbie's room with the wrapped gift, placing it gently on the bedside table. The plush dragon's wings peeked out from the candy cane paper, a playful splash of color against the sterile surroundings. For a moment, Emily stood there, watching the boy sleep. Then she whispered, "Merry Christmas, Robbie," and left the room. Christmas morning arrived with a hushed stillness, the kind that blankets the world after a heavy snowfall. Outside the hospital, the streets were quiet, save for the occasional crunch of boots against the snow. Inside, the faint sound of carols played over the intercom, a small effort to bring holiday cheer to an otherwise ordinary hospital day. Emily had been up all night. Between patient check-ins, emergency calls, and the rare lull when she could sip lukewarm coffee in the break room, sleep had become a distant dream. But the thought of Robbie waking up to find the gift kept her going. At 6:30 a.m., the moment she had been waiting for arrived. As she finished charting a patient's progress at the nurse's station, Robbie's call light blinked on. Emily grabbed a small flashlight, tucked it into her pocket, and hurried down the hall. When she opened the door to Robbie's room, the boy was sitting upright, clutching the plush dragon with both hands. His face was a mix of surprise and wonder, his cheeks pink with excitement. "Miss Emily," Robbie exclaimed, his voice stronger than it had been in days. "Look what Santa brought me." Emily feigned astonishment, stepping closer. "Whoa, that's a mighty cool dragon. Did you see him come in? Was it Rudolph, or maybe Blitzen?" Robbie giggled, shaking his head. "I don't know. I just woke up, and it was here. It even has sparkly wings." Emily knelt by the bed, reaching out to examine the dragon as if it were the most magical thing she had ever seen. "Sparkly wings? You know what that means, right?" Robbie's eyes widened. "What?" "It's a flying dragon," Emily said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "But only for brave kids who take care of him. Think you're up for the job?" Robbie nodded eagerly, hugging the dragon to his chest. The joy on Robbie's face was more than enough to make Emily's exhaustion worth it. As she adjusted the boy's blanket and made sure his IV line was secure, Emily couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. Christmas had always been about moments like these small acts of kindness that left lasting impressions. About 30 minutes later, the door to Robbie's room opened again and Olivia and Mark entered, their arms laden with brightly wrapped gifts. Robbie's face lit up even brighter when he saw them. "Mom. Dad. Santa came," Robbie exclaimed, holding up the dragon for them to see. Mark and Olivia exchanged a surprised glance before stepping closer. "Santa came here?" Mark asked, looking at the plush dragon Robbie was clutching. "And to the house," Olivia added quickly, setting a large bag of gifts on the floor. "When we got home last night, there were presents waiting under the tree. We brought them all with us." Robbie's eyes went wide. "What did Santa bring?" Mark crouched by the bag, pulling out one package at a time and handing them to Robbie. There was a set of colorful books about adventures in outer space, a puzzle shaped like a pirate ship, and the piece de resistance, a sleek, remote-controlled car with shiny blue paint. "Wow," Robbie exclaimed, reaching eagerly for the car. "Santa is the best." As Olivia handed him the next gift, Mark looked over at Emily, who was standing quietly near the doorway. There was a knowing glint in his eyes, though he said nothing. Robbie's excitement filled the room as he tore through the wrapping paper, admiring each new treasure. Olivia and Mark helped him open a few boxes, their laughter and smiles creating a warmth that seemed to chase away the sterile hospital atmosphere. Emily, watching the happy scene, felt her chest tighten with emotion. Quietly, she slipped out of the room, leaving the family to enjoy their Christmas morning. As she walked down the hallway, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. Robbie had woken up to joy and wonder, exactly as Emily had hoped. And seeing the Carters share in their son's happiness made all the effort worth it. Back at the nurse's station, Emily sat down with a sigh. She still had several hours left in her shift, but the thought of Robbie's beaming face kept her spirits high. The rest of Christmas morning passed in a cheerful blur for Robbie. His hospital room was filled with the sound of crinkling wrapping paper and excited chatter as he explored his new toys. He spent hours training his dragon, Sparky, to sit guard at the edge of his bed, testing the speed of his remote-controlled car along the floor, and flipping through the colorful pages of his new books. Although his energy was limited by his recovery, his joy seemed boundless. Emily checked on Robbie periodically throughout the morning. Each time she entered, the boy greeted her with a big smile and updates on Sparky's latest tricks. Olivia and Mark looked more at ease than they had in weeks, their faces softened by relief and gratitude. By the afternoon, the Carters stepped out briefly to get coffee, leaving Robbie engrossed in assembling a pirate-themed puzzle. Emily took the opportunity to sit with him for a few minutes. "How's Sparky doing?" she asked, crouching beside the bed. Robbie held up the plush dragon proudly. "He's the best. I named him Sparky because of his wings." "That's a perfect name," Emily said with a grin. "Sparky looks like he's got everything under control here." Robbie nodded seriously. "He's making sure I don't get any more pokes." Emily chuckled, her heart swelling. "Good job, Sparky. Keep it up." As Emily rose to leave, Robbie looked up at her, his expression suddenly thoughtful. "Miss Emily, do you think Santa knows you're here?" Emily paused, caught off guard. "Santa? I don't know. What makes you ask that?" "Because you take care of everybody," Robbie replied simply. "And Santa knows you're really nice." Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. "You think so?" Robbie nodded earnestly. "Yeah, that's probably why Santa let you work here to help people like me." For a moment, Emily was at a loss for words. She knelt back down to adjust Robbie's blanket, her voice soft. "Well, I think Santa made the right choice with you too, Robbie. You're one of the bravest kids I've ever met." Before Robbie could respond, Olivia and Mark returned, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. They thanked Emily for keeping Robbie company, and she excused herself, her chest tight with emotion as she walked down the hallway. As Emily turned a corner near the nurse's station, she heard a voice call out softly behind her. She turned to see Olivia walking briskly toward her, holding a small bag with a festive red bow. She handed it to Emily with a warm smile. "This is for you," Olivia said. "A little thank you from us." Emily hesitated, shaking her head. "You don't have to." "We want to," Olivia interrupted gently. "You've done so much for Robbie. You've done so much for all of us." Emily looked into the bag and found a beautifully wrapped gift inside. "Thank you," she said softly, touched by the gesture. Olivia smiled. "Merry Christmas, Emily." As Olivia returned to Robbie's room, Emily found a quiet spot near the break room to open the gift. Inside was a thick, hand-knitted scarf in deep green and gray. Tucked beneath it was a small card that read, "Emily, thank you for being our family's Christmas miracle. We'll never forget what you've done for Robbie. The Carters." Emily ran her fingers over the soft yarn, her eyes stinging with tears. The warmth of the scarf was nothing compared to the gratitude that filled her heart. She folded it carefully and slipped it back into the bag, vowing to treasure it always. The rest of the day flew by, and by evening Emily was finally off duty. Her shift had been long and exhausting, but also one of the most rewarding days of her career. "Miss Emily." She turned to see Robbie standing in his doorway, Sparky tucked under one arm and his parents behind him. The boy was grinning from ear to ear. "Can I give you a hug?" Robbie asked. Emily's heart swelled. "Of course you can." Robbie ran to her, wrapping his small arms around her waist. "Thank you for the best Christmas ever," he said, his voice muffled against her scrubs. Emily crouched to Robbie's level, returning the hug. "Merry Christmas, buddy. Keep being brave, okay?" Robbie nodded, holding Sparky close. Olivia and Mark stepped forward, their gratitude evident in their expressions. "Thank you, Emily," Olivia said, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything." Emily smiled, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. It's been an honor to take care of Robbie. He's an amazing kid. Mark placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. You're part of our family now, whether you like it or not. Emily laughed, the warmth of their words staying with her as she finally made her way to the parking lot. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the world covered in a pristine white blanket. Emily wrapped the new scarf around her neck, its soft warmth a reminder of the love and gratitude she had experienced that day. As she walked to her car, she glanced back at the hospital, the windows glowing warmly against the dark sky. Christmas had always been special to her, but this one was different. It wasn't the presents or the carols or the decorations, it was the simple joy of seeing a child's face light up, of being part of a moment that would be remembered forever. And for Emily, that was the greatest gift of all. A week after Christmas, the warmth of the holiday season lingered in Emily's heart as she returned to her routine at St. Margaret's Children's Hospital. The days were busy, filled with checkups, charts, and new patients, but her thoughts often drifted back to Robbie and his beaming smile as he clutched Sparky on Christmas morning. One evening, after an especially long shift, Emily trudged up the steps to her small apartment. As she fished her keys from her pocket, she noticed an envelope sticking out of the mailbox. Its thick, cream-colored paper and elegant calligraphy immediately stood out against the usual bills and advertisements. Curious, Emily opened the envelope and unfolded a handwritten letter inside. The paper had a faint lavender scent, and the precise penmanship revealed it was from Olivia Carter. Dear Emily, we hope this letter finds you well. Mark, Robbie, and I have been thinking about you so much since Christmas. Your kindness brought light into our lives at a time when we needed it most, and your thoughtful gift to Robbie was nothing short of magical. Over the holidays, we reflected on how we could possibly express our gratitude for everything you've done. Words alone don't feel like enough, so we would love to invite you to dinner at our home this Saturday evening. It would mean the world to us to thank you in person. Please let us know if you can join us. Warmly, Olivia and Mark Carter. Emily stood in the quiet hallway, the letter in her hands. A mix of surprise and hesitation swirled in her chest. Dinner with the Carters? She had only known them as a family struggling through a difficult time, never imagining they lived a life where letters were written on stationery that probably cost more than her week's groceries. Still, their sincerity shone through every word. Smiling to herself, Emily decided she would accept the invitation. After all, how could she say no to the family who had made her Christmas unforgettable? Saturday evening arrived with a crisp chill in the air, and Emily pulled her coat tighter as she navigated the winding roads outside the city. The address Olivia had provided led her to a part of town she rarely visited, where sprawling estates were tucked behind ornate gates and tall hedges. When her GPS announced she had arrived, Emily's jaw dropped. The Carter residence was nothing short of breathtaking. Behind wrought iron gates, a wide driveway curved toward a stately home surrounded by manicured gardens dusted with fresh snow. Soft lights glimmered from every window, illuminating the house's elegant stone facade. Twinkling strands of holiday lights wrapped around the oak trees lining the drive, adding a warm, festive glow. Emily parked her modest sedan near the entrance, her hands tightening on the steering wheel. For a moment she considered turning back. She had no idea the Carters lived like this. She had always seen them as a loving, humble family sitting by their son's hospital bed, never imagining they lived in such luxury. Gathering her courage, Emily stepped out of the car and approached the massive wooden door. Before she could ring the bell, the door swung open, and Olivia greeted her with a bright smile. "Emily, you made it," she said warmly, pulling her into the foyer. "We're so glad you're here." Inside, the house was just as impressive as its exterior. High ceilings, a grand staircase, and a crackling fireplace gave the space a cozy yet regal charm. The scent of freshly baked bread, and something savory wafted from the kitchen, and holiday decorations adorned every surface. A towering Christmas tree stood in the corner, its ornaments sparkling in the soft light. "Wow," Emily said, taking it all in. Your home is beautiful. Thank you, Olivia replied, waving off the compliment as though it were nothing. It's just a house. What makes it special is the people inside. At that moment, Robbie came running into the room, clutching Sparky the dragon to his chest. Miss Emily, he cried, his face lighting up with excitement. Emily crouched down, opening her arms as Robbie barreled into her. Hey, buddy. How's Sparky doing? He's great, Robbie declared, holding the plush dragon up proudly. I take him everywhere. Even to the doctor's office. Mark entered the room next, extending a hand toward Emily with a grateful smile. Good to see you, Emily. Thanks for making the trip. Thank you for inviting me, Emily replied, shaking Mark's hand. I have to admit, I didn't realize how far out of town you lived. Olivia chuckled. It's a bit of a trek, isn't it? Let's get you settled. Dinner will be ready soon. Throughout dinner, the conversation flowed easily. They talked about Robbie's continued recovery, Emily's work at the hospital, and lighthearted stories about Robbie's adventures with Sparky. Olivia and Mark were gracious hosts, making Emily feel like a cherished guest rather than someone they barely knew. As dessert was served, a decadent chocolate mousse that Olivia proudly admitted to making herself, Mark cleared his throat and set his fork down. His demeanor shifted slightly, taking on a more serious tone. Emily, Mark began, meeting her eyes, we asked you here tonight not just to thank you but to do something more meaningful. Emily raised her eyebrows, unsure where this was going. You really don't have to do anything. I was just doing my job. Olivia leaned forward, her expression earnest. That's exactly why we want to do this, Emily. You didn't have to go out of your way to make Robbie's Christmas special, or to care for him the way you did. But you did it all with so much compassion. We can never repay you for the joy you brought to our family, but we want to try. Mark reached under the table and handed Emily a small envelope. This is for you. Emily hesitated, then opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000. She stared at it, stunned. I can't accept this, she said, shaking her head. It's far too much. Olivia smiled gently. It's not just a gift, Emily, it's a token of our appreciation. You've done so much for us and so many others at the hospital. We want you to have something for yourself, whether it's for a trip you've always wanted to take, paying off bills, or just taking a break. You deserve it. Emily looked down at the check, feeling a lump form in her throat. Thank you, she said softly. This means so much, but it's more than I could have ever expected. That's not all, Mark added, leaning back in his chair. We've also made a significant donation to St. Margaret's in your name. It's going toward expanding the pediatric wing and creating a fund to help families who can't afford treatment. Emily's eyes widened. You've donated to the hospital. We wanted to honor the place that brought us together, Olivia explained. Your work inspired us to give back in a way that will help more children like Robbie and more people like you. Emily was overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. This is incredible. Say yes, Robbie piped up, grinning. Emily laughed, tears welling in her eyes. Yes, and thank you so much. The rest of the evening was filled with warmth and laughter. But as Emily drove home that night, she felt a deeper gratitude than she had ever known. The Carters' generosity wasn't just a reward, it was a reflection of the kindness and care that had connected them all. For Emily, it was a reminder of the profound impact of compassion and the unexpected ways it could change lives, including her own. In the days after her dinner with the Carters, Emily finally cashed the check they had given her. It wasn't about anything extravagant. She used it to pay off overdue bills, replace the tires on her car, and take care of a few other essentials she'd been putting off. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of relief. The constant worry about how to make ends meet had eased, and she could breathe a little easier. Still, what meant the most to Emily wasn't the money. It was the reminder of why she loved her work, helping others, being there for families in their hardest moments, and knowing she'd made a difference. That was why she'd become a nurse. and that was why she'd keep showing up, one day at a time.